The first thing we want to do this morning is to create a couple Windows servers. We're going to, in fact, need 4 of them. 3 of them are going to be base installations, just regular, the GUI, regular desktop type environment. The 4th one we're going to be doing is the server core. If you do look at your learning plan, again, don't print it out yet because it may change. It's a pretty aggressive learning plan, so we may or may not finish it up. But if you look at that, it's the first activity, is creating 3 Windows Server 2012 standard editions. The configuration we're looking at, in fact, let me just bring it over here, is 2 gigs of RAM, network address translation, using all the defaults during the install. The administrator password is wrong. Oh, it's showing up here. Oh, it must be an HTML thing. Okay, where would that be? Password. Okay, how do you not convince it to be? What would be the HTML code for not hiding the $signs? Put it in quotes? Probably not, but we'll try it. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Administrator password is password capital P-A $W0 RD. That's not a capital O, that's a 0. The name of the virtual machines, the first virtual machines, when you're creating them, it asks you to create a name. You could name them like Server 2012-1, Server 2012-2, 3, whatever. They're eventually going to be called DC SID A for Sydney, SID B, and the server core is going to be SID C. Do not clone or copy them. Don't install it once and say, oh, I already have a copy, let me clone it. I actually want you to install it 3 times. It's a really simple, easy install. Go ahead and do it 3 times. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to create a new virtual machine. You can follow along and do it. I'm just going to sort of keep going along though, and then you can sort of watch it and take notes and ask questions later, or either follow along or do it at the same time. Typical and custom. I usually choose custom just to see all the options. That's completely your choice. And we are using Workstation 9.
Are you hearing something on our monitors right now?
You don't see anything?
No, 21.
It went away. Okay, so on Workstation 9, this gives you those defaults. I usually choose I will install the operating system later. It's much more realistic. If you try to use the installer image, which you can't, you're doing it 3 times, so you can try it once that way. It just gives you some pre-configured stuff, and it's called the easy install, and so it bypasses a lot of the interaction that you would have. It asks all the questions up front and then just installs it for you. So in a virtual environment, that's great. In a physical environment, that's not how it's like, so I'll make it like the physical environment. Working with virtual machines, the next thing we need to do is pretty much build it, and we're kind of saying, okay, what are we going to put on this, and then that's going to give us some defaults to work with as far as, you know, how many processors do I need, how much RAM do I need, my hard drive side, and so forth. We'll be choosing Microsoft Windows, and in fact it does have Windows Server 2012 on. Here's one of the options. So if I choose Server 2012 and I click Next, now it's asking for the virtual machine name. I'm going to change this, mark this one to be DC for domain controller. Now this is probably the most important thing that you choose in the entire installation process. Almost everything else, including its name and memory and processors and type of network, can be changed later on. If you put this in the wrong place, it'll go away when you restart your computer. You may not even have enough room where you're going to put it or whatever. So you have to make sure that you put this on your portable drive. So I'm going to browse for my drive. I'm looking for, on my computer, my D drive. And then I have a virtual machines folder. Underneath virtual machines, I have a Server1 folder. But this is Server2, sorry. I want to make a new folder for Server2. And now that just means there's a folder for all my Server2 course stuff, and now you need to make another folder underneath there to what you want to name this. And to keep everything consistent, I'm just going to name it that folder DC for my domain controller. So later on when I want to open this, I can do File Open, I search my Server2 folder, my DC folder, and then I can just run that virtual machine from there. I click Next. Processors is 1. Amount of memory, it defaults to 2. We'll use 2 for installing for right now. We have plenty of memory. We will be running 2, 3, 4 of these servers at the same time. That's still only 8 gigs. Your machines have 16 on them, so you're certainly fine. If you're trying to do this at home, you may run into issues unless you have 12 or 16 gigs of RAM. If you have 6 or 8 gigs at home, you could probably get by with running these at 1 gig. I was running these at 1 the other day and it seemed to be okay. You know, I don't know whether issues will come up, but you know, you can get by with 1 if you really need to. We have the space, so we might as well use it though for here. So we'll put 2 gigs. Then I click Next. Like I said, we want to use network address translation on here. Use the defaults for the next couple of screens. And it defaults to a 60 gig hard drive. This is completely optional. Store the virtual disk as a single file. It ends up being, you know, a couple gig file because you're installing the operating system, 4, 5, 6 gigs, and it could grow up to 60 gigs, but it's one individual file. The default is splitting it up into multiple files and it makes it into multiple smaller files. So you're going to end up with, I think the maximum size is 2 gigs, so you're going to end up with 30 virtual hard drive files. Pros and cons for each. We don't need to get into that right now. I'll just do the default of making multiple files on here. The disk file name is the default. And then we just have created our virtual machine. When we're done, we come up to a regular machine. It tells us all the stuff that we have here. It hasn't booted yet. Before we boot, we need to put our installation media in, our CD into our CD-ROM drive. To put our CD in the CD-ROM drive, I double-click on my CD-DVD drive over here and ask me how I want to configure that. I want to use an ISO image, and then I want to browse for that image that I want to work with. Now you downloaded them somewhere. Mine, I have all my ISO images together, and then underneath Windows I have a folder, and then I have a special one for server admin. I'm looking for my Server 2012. I only gave you this file last week. My other server admin classes require the other ISO images, but this is the file that you should have somewhere. When I open it up and I click OK, it's now mounted. It's like putting a physical CD into a physical tray, except this is a virtual CD in an ISO file format into a virtual CD-ROM drive, and now I can boot it. And I click power on. It's actually a pretty quick install. Move this over here. There we go. Yep.
Can you remind me again of that page number 63? Is that your account?
Let me resume this. Okay, Windows Server basic install. Most of these are going to be defaults. I'll talk about them quickly just because it's kind of new, a little bit different. Language is English, time and currency is English, and keyboard is US, which is all fine. And then you get an Install Now button. It has become a much simpler install. There's very few options that you actually choose during the installation. Most of it's configuring it after the server gets installed. Just like we did last semester in Server 2008, you know, you kind of come up and you get this choice of what version you want to install. We only have really 2. We have the standard and data center, and then both of those are GUI or core. Server core is the command line PowerShell interface, and that's what you get. And that's the 4th server install. We're going to do this today, and we're going to be doing 3 of them during the server with the GUI. As you notice, the architecture is only 64-bit. There is no 32-bit version anymore, as there was in 2008. You still have the option of 32 or 64. It's only 64 starting in 2012. Yes?
Isn't the DC though? Is Magneto?
Excellent question. Is the DC the data center? No. Data center is a... I've never actually used a data center one. It's a much larger scale type system. None of the books or training covers it. I mean, I'm not sure even... It's obviously used, just not sure where or how. Everything's usually standard or professional or, you know, whatever. Enterprise, I think, is what we use for 2008, what they call it. It is the standard edition all you're looking for. What the DC stands for, what we named it, it's your domain controller. So what we're going to end up creating, and that's part of the appendix. You guys all read the appendix, and so you know, we're creating a domain controller, and then we're joining Sydney A, Sid B, and Sid C all to that domain controller. So we have a nice happy network of 4 interconnected servers, one of them being the domain controller, and where we're controlling Active Directory and all that kind of stuff. So it is kind of fun and exciting, bring it all together and seeing it all happen that way. But yes, it doesn't mean data center, it means domain controller. So we're using the regular one with GUI, so it's the second option here. And I click next. I accept the license terms. I read these thoroughly before. You certainly would before you would ever click accept. And I'm not sure why they give you this option. It says upgrade. I don't have a current server, so there's nothing to really upgrade. So you do need to use the custom, which is install Windows only. Makes your choice easy here as well. You only have one drive to choose from. If you had multiple drives, which most servers would, you choose which physical drive you want to install this on. And then you let it do its thing. Okay, when it's done with that screen of copying and installing or whatever, it's going to reboot. Come back to the main server screen. It actually reboots twice, it looks like.
Yep.
Create a new virtual bus.
Yeah. 70, yeah, 60.
When your server eventually restarts, you should come to this screen for the password. This is for the built-in administrator account, and this is where you want that password, capital PA $$W0RD, and capital P, lowercase a, $$W0RD. And I just looked at the learning plan and my dollar sign has disappeared again. Finalize your settings.
LP01-1 0 PA money sign W0 RD.
For the, what do we do for the product key? Product key.
So when we come to the login screen, it's Control-Alt-Delete to log in. If you have the VM menus up on top, even if you do full screen on here, if you bring it up, you should have the little 3 Control-Deletes up on top, 3 buttons, 3 keyboard keys. If you click on that, that brings up to it. The other way, if you would do it from the keyboard, it's Control-Alt-Insert. Now that might throw you off as I Control-Insert, Delete, whatever. So either way you want to do it, it's Control-Insert if you want to send a control delete to a virtual machine, or I like just using the 3 keys up on top. Capital P A $$W 0RD. Let you log in for the first time. I strongly suggest that you do through the whole installation of one server and then start the second server and go through the others. You're going to be kind of mixed up of where you are, and just nice and clean and gives you the practice. When it starts up, it'll automatically start the server manager as well. It'll do that all the time until you tell it to stop. And there's just a couple things we want to change at this point. The rest of the actual, this is actually pre-appendix activities. The appendix activities assume that you have these 4 built, and so we're going to build those 4, and then we're going to go into those appendix exercises. Probably one of the first things that you want to do is configuring this local server. And this is a couple changes that we want to make on there. So when you come to the screen of the server properties, if you kind of scroll over here, it's a little bit different environment. But for time zone, it's listed for Pacific time. Life revolves around Redmond. Change the time zone. Click the button that says change the time zone, and we'll do a drop down, and we will go to Central US, UTC -6. Automatically adjust for daylight saving time, and it has the right dates on there. You click OK, and then click OK. Let's see if there's anything else we need to change right now. And that should be it for now. Just to show you around the screen a little bit, as long as we're in here, it is a little bit different. You have seen some of this before, but the screens are a little bit different. We have a dashboard that we'll be working with. It sort of gives you quick access to configuring the local machine, adding roles and features, adding other servers, and then creating server groups. We'll be concentrating on these first 2, especially the roles and features. That's where later on we'll be adding Active Directory and things like that. If I close out of here, it has the regular X in the upper right hand corner. It gives you 3 icons down the quick launch. You have your file browser, you have PowerShell, and then you have Server Manager. So if you click on Server Manager, it brings that up. I can bring up a PowerShell window, and I can bring up my File Manager. If you notice, this looks very much like Windows 8. In fact, it's very much like Windows 8. If you hover down the lower left-hand corner, you actually get the Start pane. What's this called? The new Windows Modern interface. So server administration tools are through tiles, and you have administrative tools here, PowerShell, Task Manager. When we install Active Directory, you're going to see a whole bunch more tiles show up on here for DNS and user and computer accounts. Active Directory services, DHCP, all those kinds of things end up being on this screen. To get back to your other screen, you click on Desktop, and you can sort of switch back and forth this way. There's other ways of doing it as well. By hitting the Window key, we'll do that. And now the most important part is, how do you turn this thing off? There's no Start button. If you go to the lower left-hand corner or the upper right, you end up popping up this little side bar here, which brings you to the Start button or Search or your Settings. Underneath Settings is where you can have your power option, and then when you click power, you can either shut down or restart. One nice new feature in 2012, even though it took you 13 more steps to get to the power switch option, when you do shut down, you don't have to type something in, like we used to hit the space or type something on there. You don't have to type anything in. It defaults to other unplanned reason, and that's certainly fine. You just click continue, and then it does power down. If I power on the machine, and you can see it actually does power on pretty quickly once it's installed.
We're on the other 2, DC1 and DC2. Oh,
So there's the SY
So it boots very, very quickly. I mean, we're already back to the login screen. I hit the Control-Delete. I log in with $$W0RD. And I'm in. Now, one thing I probably do at this point, before we move on, it's not listed on the learning plan, I suppose I could put that on there, is we should probably install VMware tools. So I'm going to close the server manager. I go up to VM, and I want to install the VMware tools. And I click install. And it takes a little bit to launch. It mounts a virtual CDG drive. The diamond comes up. If not, we can click on the browser, go to our D drive, and launch it from there. Preparing VMware tools for installation. Background. There we go. Click next. A typical install is fine, and I click install. And when you're done, you click finish. And it wants to restart your computer. You don't have to restart your computer because that's the last thing we want to do. So I'm going to click no, and then I'm just going to shut it down. Settings, power, shut down. So it is a very, very fast system. And now, before we move on, our last thing that we want to do with this virtual machine is take a snapshot of it. We have a base image, it's installed, it's where we want it to be, so we're going to take a snapshot of it. VM, snapshot, take snapshot, and I always call mine base image. You can call it clean install, or just install, and you're done. Now we get to do this again. So we can create a new virtual machine. This time, kind of click through here. We'll call it SID A. I'm going to browse my computer, my D drive, virtual machines, Server2. Make a new folder called SID A. Click next, next, next. Go to my CD-ROM drive. Choose my server 2012. And I do the whole process again. So continue on with that. Do the original one, the DC, SID A, and then SID B. Or at least do SID A. Do SID A, and then you can take a break if you want. When you come back, you can do SID B, and then we'll do the server core one together because it's pretty much the same, just looks a little bit different.